Pakistan, July 15 to August 2nd, 2019. I wanted to visit Pakistan for years. After applying for a visa in 2016 and getting no results, I nearly gave up on going. But then a new president was elected who encouraged tourism. I applied a second time, and I got my visa after 30 days. Finally, my dream to visit Pakistan came to fruition. Pakistan would be my 193rd country, one of the last countries to reach my goal of 196. This video will outline what I did over the course of 18 days in Pakistan. July 15, Day 1. After waiting 3 years to visit Pakistan, I decided to visit as many cities as I could. I would visit 15 cities in all. Starting in Islamabad, Owas and Irfan met me at the airport upon arrival. We had lunch at Safa Gold Mall upstairs in the food court. They introduced me to some great Pakistani vegetarian food. Next, Owas took me to Monol restaurant in the hills overlooking the city. I enjoyed a lemonade mint drink while up there, and then down to visit Faisal Mosque, which construction began in 1976 and was funded by the government of Saudi Arabia. In the evening, I met with Akbar and his co-worker Ehtisham to have dinner. July 16, Day 2. The next day, there were no flights up to Gilgit, so I caught a van to visit Peshawar, 2 hours to the west instead. I met Kamran in the van, and upon arrival, he guided me to visit the Peshawar Zoo. I was interested in visiting the animals, but the locals were interested in visiting with me. Somehow, the tourist was a rare species in Pakistan. Next, we went to meet Basit, who joined me to show me the university, where I would try some cricket. Cricket was a whole new sport to me, and I wanted to try hitting the ball. Oops, that's a foul ball. We were en route to visit a famous couchsurfer named Kaiser, who had been hosting guests for years. I finished the day by meeting with my host Hasib. July 17, Day 3. On my third day, Hasib provided a nice breakfast and then gave me a tour to visit the famous Khyber Pass Gate, known as Bab-e-Khyber. It was a monument that stood at the entrance of the Khyber Pass. The gate itself was built in 1965. We visited the university, where the building is featured on the 1,000 rupee note. From there, I visited the library with Basit, passed by the museum, and stopped to see the clock tower near Seti House, a tourist site. I stayed another day in Peshawar so I could go visit Dar Adam Khel, a famous village an hour south of Peshawar that was located in the former tribal areas. July 18, Day 4. With Basit, Hamza joined me, and all three of us hired a taxi to drive us to Dar Adam Khel, a village known as the Gun City, for making weapon replicas using rudimentary tools. We battled the rain with no working windshield wipers to get there. We stopped halfway at a truck stop to have lunch and meet a local named Noman, who was from that village. We made it to the village and visited the local workshops to see how they made the guns from scratch. We stopped to visit some of the shops where the sales were made, and I learned that shopkeepers have been doing this for generations. This was almost like family tradition, making and selling guns. After spending about an hour and a half visiting the shops, it was time to go. We returned back to Peshawar, and Hamza would take me on his motorbike to catch the van back to Islamabad, where I would continue by taxi to meet Dawood for dinner. He sure made good pakoras. July 19, Day 5. Finally, my time to visit Gilgit-Baltistan had arrived. I took a taxi to the Islamabad airport to catch my flight to Skardu. Dawood recommended I visit Skardu, which was more beautiful in his opinion than Gilgit. I always believed in visiting more places, so I accepted the idea. It was a short 45-minute flight up north. This lake was Shangri-La Resort from the air. We landed in what some could call Big Sky Country. With mountains everywhere, this place was vast, and I was excited to start exploring. Wazir finished work and offered me a tour. He took me to Buddha Rock, Satpara Lake, and to the Twin Lakes, which was mostly marsh because of the dry summer conditions. After having some lunch at his family's home, he dropped me off in town, and I would take public transportation to Shigar to meet Aslam, a photographer living in one of the villages near Shigar. I would have dinner with Aslam and his friend, and they would recommend me places to visit the next day. July 20, Day 6. In the morning, I went to visit Shigar Fort, and the several old mosques in the area, including Amburik Mosque. By late morning, I departed Shigar to start my journey to Kaplu, another town recommended to visit. I first took a car with Musa, and then a motorbike with Ismail. The views were incredible. Soon I arrived in Kaplu, this green area to the right, and searched for my host Abbas. His phone was turned off, so I went around asking the locals until I met the police. The police knew where he was, so they called him and told Abbas to meet me at the cafe. He met me at the cafe, however the electricity went out, so we would meet in the dark. He would take me to Mashabroom guest house where I would have dinner and there stay for the night. July 21, Day 7. The weather was so wonderful the next morning. I went apricot picking first thing. Abbas planned to provide a tour of Kaplu on his motorbike for me. First, we went to get fuel and then stopped by the mechanic shop to get something repaired. We passed by an old mosque and then up the hill to start our hike to visit another old mosque on the mountaintop. Along the way, we stopped by a cafe where I would try salt tea, made from green tea, butter, milk, and salt. After our hike, we went to visit Kaplu Fort, which was built in mid-19th century, and where I found dried apricots for sale. I spoke with Nabila, who worked as a receptionist at Serena Kaplu Palace, and she told me some historical facts about the fort. After a nice tour provided by Abbas, I continued on my way and caught a ride to Skardu with Sanya, an Australian hiker and her entourage. I continued onwards to spend the night at Shangri-La Resort. It took a few rides, but I managed to get there. This guy was in charge of all the construction on the road. The check-in staff were helpful and friendly. I got my key, and they showed me to my room. Every room had windows facing that magnificent lake. This was Shangri-La Resort. This resort had an old airplane they converted into a restaurant. The night views were phenomenal. Talk about a picturesque setting in the wilderness of northern Pakistan. July 22, Day 8. Waking up to the beautiful Shangri-La Resort. They call this heaven on earth. It was definitely worth the effort to come to visit this hotel resort. I really loved this resort, and it was a must-visit place in Skardu. Today's mission was to take a bus on the dusty Skardu-Gilgit dirt road that hugged the mountain's edge. It was the most uncomfortable bus ride I have ever taken, and it lasted 9 hours. My bag was completely laden in dust when I arrived. Arriving to Gilgit, I was so exhausted that I stayed at the first hotel I found. July 23, Day 9. After a restful night, I had renewed energy to start the day, going for lunch, having a haircut, and then catching a ride north of Gilgit, directly up to Sost, with Rahim Ullah. Rahim Ullah was driving 4 hours from Gilgit to Sost. We would drive through the Hunza Valley, and soon I would see my first glacier in Passau. I was on my way to the China border. Along the way, I met an Italian couple driving their Jeep from Malaysia to Italy. I had dinner with Rahim's family, and then spent the night in their guest room. I was so happy to reach Sost. July 24, Day 10. Leaving Sost on a beautiful morning day, I caught a ride to make the journey up north to Hunjarab Pass. At the park's entrance, we stopped for breakfast. Hunjarab Pass was where they had the world's highest ATM at 16,000 feet. That was one of the attractions there, besides the arch over the road leading to China. Nearby the road was snow from the glacier just up the valley. On the way down, we drove non-stop, passing Attabad Lake, until we reached Karimabad, the capital of Hunza Valley. I would meet Kerula, a native of Hunza, who met me at Mountain Cup Cafe and introduced me to his town. I met Nadim, a local Hunzai, who would help me find lodging for the night at his uncle's place. July 25, Day 11. The next morning, I walked up the steep streets to visit Baltit Fort in the morning, where I ran into my Australian friend Sanya, whom I had met a few days prior when she gave me a ride into Skardu. We toured the fort together. The views were fantastic. I met the famous Baltit tour guide while in town, whose beard was 22 years old. Here was another view from Baltit Fort overlooking Hunza Valley. I visited the Morning Glory Cafe, where Kerula worked. Next, I strolled over to visit Altit Fort across town and passed by the local swimming hole where all the village children were enjoying the cool waters on a hot day. I also happened to meet the king's personal driver, who had worked in Dubai for 20 years, but recently moved back to drive full-time for the king. The royal family of Hunza had traced their roots back to Macedonia, and judging by the looks of Hunzai people, it made sense. I left Karimabad and headed back into Gilgit to stay in the city, so I would be prepared for my flight the next day to Islamabad. Along the way, I found apricots being dried next to the roadside on a huge rock. Omar met me upon arrival, and in the evening we went to have a snack and sit near the river to feel the cool river breeze with his friends. Omar was a great host. July 26, Day 12. Early the next morning, I walked to the Gilgit airport, only to find out my flight was delayed. At least I wasn't making any connections. I saw the plane that had skidded off the runway because of a burst tire a few days prior. I boarded my flight and we took off safely and returned to Islamabad. I caught a bus north to Abbottabad to visit the alleged last known residence of bin Laden. I also visited the mountainside where they had a new chairlift attraction for the locals. It had just opened a few years prior. It was nice meeting Irshad's family. July 27, Day 13. In the morning and after breakfast, I caught a van back to Islamabad to meet with Aakash, who would meet me at the metro bus station in Rawalpindi and take me with his friend on a motorbike to visit Ayub National Park and the Islamabad Zoo called Jungle World. There, we saw many exotic animals like this one. We ate lunch afterwards, and then I would take a bus to Lahore, where I would meet Rana. July 28, Day 14. Muhammad Altaf took a bus 2 hours from his home village to come meet me in Lahore. I joined Rana in the morning, and we took his motorcycle to have lunch, where Altaf would join us for lunch. We enjoyed traditional Pakistani food at this restaurant. I organized to meet with Saqib, who was the brother from a friend I knew in Dallas. Saqib toured me around Lahore, and we visited the Badshadi Mosque and then Lahore Fort. We even squeezed in time to visit the Lahore Zoo before having dinner at Sephora Foods. July 29, Day 15. The next morning, Altaf showed me the Jinnah Library, where we managed to take a tour. It was an old building from the British era, which was now used as a library. Membership was required to enter. The guide showed us different parts of the library, and I marveled at its history. Next, we went to visit one of Altaf's friends, Rubab, and then met with the couchsurfer Akmal to have lunch at Pizza Hut. My idea was to reach Faisalabad by evening, so I caught a bus after lunch was over. I would meet Sohail, who I had been in contact with for 3 years, and who invited me to Pakistan. To wrap up the night, I went to see the famous clock tower of Faisalabad, which had 8 roads leading to this historical monument. July 30, Day 16. Sohail's friend was Rana, and he would give me a nice tour of Faisalabad, showing me everything that was important to be seen. He showed me the Agriculture University, the park, where they had a F-86 aircraft on display. There was also nice gazebos in the park. We went to a famous juice bar to have a fresh mango smoothie, visited the shrine of Abu Anas Sufi Barkat Ali, and we visited a small textile factory that turned thread into fabric. All the fabric would be sold to companies to make t-shirts and hoodies. We also visited Misakul Mall, and lastly a bedding textile factory. Then drama unfolded. After 16 days, the heat finally caught up with me, and I failed to drink enough water. So by evening time, I experienced severe heat exhaustion and was taken to the hospital, where they balanced my system back to normal. I learned to drink more water when outside in hot temperatures of 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit. July 31, Day 17. The next morning, I said goodbye to Owas and Sohail. I caught a bus to Multan, where I would meet with Amir, who picked me up at the bus station. I would meet with his workers at his office, then go pick up my friend Sushma from Nepal, who was attending the Bahauddin Zakaria University to become a pharmacist. She joined us for lunch at Veneto Italian restaurant. I never imagined to find an Italian restaurant in Pakistan. The food was great, but of course it was spicy. And next we would take a short tour around the city. After dropping her off at her hostel, I headed off to the airport to catch a flight to Karachi, where Hassan would pick me up. Surprisingly, at the airport, I ran into my first host, Akbar, who was on his way to Azerbaijan with his friend for vacation. August 1st, day 18. After a strenuous 17 days, I rested all day in Karachi to recover from my busy days. Hassan was a big couchsurfer, and he had his own big sign for couchsurfing meetings he held in the city. In the evening, I joined Hassan for dinner with his colleagues. I enjoyed meeting his friends and co-workers for dinner. The host of the dinner party was celebrating because he got accepted to attend the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia. August 2nd, day 19. Early morning at 1 a.m., I would go to the airport to catch my 5 a.m. flight. I would depart Karachi airport to return back home, transiting in Istanbul en route to Los Angeles. I enjoyed my 18-day trip in Pakistan and was glad to meet with all the wonderful people. The two most asked questions were, how was Pakistan and how were the people? Pakistan was a diverse country with many regions. The northern areas were picturesque with the Karakoram mountain range. The people were welcoming and always willing to give me a hand. The nice thing about Pakistan was that many people knew English. Many thanks to all the people that made this trip possible and for helping me along the way. Hopefully one day I will return to Pakistan again.